For nearly 25 years, I've attended, spoken at, listened to, and contributed to untold numbers of threads and themes in the wealth technology space. Yet to me, something still is missing. It's the human stories and perspectives of wealth management. How does all this wealth technology impact investors and those that support them? I'm Doug Fritz, CEO and founder of F2 Strategy, and host to our new Get Vocal series, On the Road with the Man in the Van. And I'm determined to look at technology of wealth in a whole new way, one that I hope connects all of us with the more human side of what we do. So buckle up and join me as the humans of wealth technology are about to get vocal.
Hi, everybody. This is Doug Fritz, the president and founder of F2 Strategy, and this is another installment of our Man in the Van series, the vocal voice of client advisor leader series here at F2. What we're trying to do is uncover the stories, the backstories, the sort of the rationale and reasoning and passions of well-known leaders in the wealth management industry. And I'm absolutely delighted today to have with me a friend first, and it's someone that I've had the benefit of working with for many years, almost my entire career, which is Alois Pirker, who heads up wealth management research at Aite Group. Just absolutely delighted to have you. You and I have been friends for many years and shared unknown numbers of dinners and drinks in New York and other places at conferences. And when we were putting this series together, one of the people that I really wanted to have focused was you. Not to overplug Alois here for a second, but you are one of the very rare people in this world that I can spend an entire evening with and constantly just like share ideas and bounce ideas and suppositions and what if. So I've always had fun hanging out with you, and I've always had fun listening to you and just paying attention to the research you do. And I want to thank you in advance just for participating in our series, and I think you'll get a lot out of it.
No, Doug, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it, and I feel the same. I mean, we have had such great conversations over the years, and it's fantastic to see you in the van. I love this van. I have to say, you got to give me the make and special fit one day, because I'd love to produce one for myself. That's really.
I'll just give you the keys and you can come take it up and down it's the California coast out there out my back window.
I love it.
But so let's start off with you, man. Like, how did you get here? I mean, you're in Boston, right? You're
Yes.
in Boston. You're working with in the wealth management industry and research for many years. But what's the origin story? Like, how did you get to this place in your career?
Yeah, it has taken a few stops, right? As most careers, when you get to my age have taken. But I'm actually from Austria originally, so I'm from Graz, which is the hometown of one of your famous governors, Schwarzenegger, right? So we're from the same street.
I recognize the accent. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. I'm cultivating my accent as he did, right? So the thing. But anyway, I have less muscles and probably a lot less good looking than he is. But that's just the hand of cards I got dealt. But I'm not here to be a movie star, so that's okay. But anyway, so I grew up there. Did a business high school. High school was a business focus. Went into applied computer sciences, which is basically a mix of business and computer science. And I've always straddled those kind of worlds, where I was deep enough in data and computer science to be dangerous, but not really a coder. And then on the other side, always have an eye to the business side. What is the impact of it? So that's my entire bachelor's and master's degrees were dedicated to that. I was actually started to start a PhD program when my tutor was leaving on federated search, back in the day when Google was sort of still in its infancy, kind of thing, and so we defined a topic. The topic was going away by my tutor, leaving for UBS, and he said, like, we got so many jobs at UBS here, and this was in Switzerland at the time, and so so I joined him. I sort of haphazardly, because finance is not what I want to do right in my life, and I really got hooked in it. And 3 weeks into the start date, UBS announced a merger with Swiss Bank Corporation, and that was quite a ride, where the UBS defined a one brand strategy, bought Payne Webber subsequently and all of that. So it was a really interesting 7 years that unrolled afterwards. I've spent 3 years in Switzerland, spent 4 years in London. Part of it on data warehouse projects, which again, I always did the business analysis, system analysis, and in a merging firm, it's really interesting to understand how do those firms come together, how do they take what needs to be done in order to make them work together, and so it was a really interesting time. And then also the most important thing of that time was I met my wife at UBS, which was of course pivotal for any subsequent steps, because we ended up in Boston, where she's from, and the rest is history. I joined the research world and really have started sinking my teeth into the trends that make up the industry.
That's awesome. I love those stories. How long have you been in the U.S.? So you were in Switzerland a little while, like you've been in the U.S. for a while, like since I've known you here.
Yeah, 17 years now. So it has been a long time, and again, I had the pleasure of being really early on with Aite Group, and we built up the wealth management side here. So it really was a fun ride, or has been a fun ride, shall we say? And yeah, no, Boston is great. We live in the North Shore of Boston, and it's a fantastic place. So it definitely feels home. My daughter grew up here, so it really is a great place. Despite Austria, of course, has always a very special place in my heart, but we fortunately be able to be in both places regularly.
Love it. The so obviously I know Aite. I was a client of Aite's back 15 years ago from Wells Fargo days, and have stayed very, very close to the research you guys have done. Those that don't know Aite, like Aite Navarca, what like just explain what it is to some folks that may not know.
Yeah, so what we do is we are a cast of senior characters, if you want, that are looking at all have in common that they have an industry background that spans multiple years or several stops in their careers, and we look at how the industry is changing. So I've been observing the industry now since I've been in the US for 17 years, and we do that from multiple perspectives. One side, we talk with smart folks like yourself, industry executives that have been moving and shaking at the various firms, but then also we do surveys of advisors, consumers, and so on. So we look bottom up at what are the trends that are making up the industry, where's the industry going from flow perspective and so on, but then also top down what is happening on the strategy side. And strategy is really where we play most. So we want to understand if, for example, topics like direct indexing come into play, what does it do? You know, there's of course a technology implication, but there's also a business implication. And similar when we go back, say 15 years and Unified Managed Accounts came out, everybody said, well, that's great, but unless you change the business around it, nothing will happen, right? So we always, in our research, we try to keep an eye to the technology side. We try to keep an eye on the business side and really see how one acts on the other. And most folks these days, and I remember the very first Invest conference, I believe you were on the panel that I moderated, and I asked Riley Etheridge, who's over at Capital Group, the question like, how does he work with technology? And he gave me the famous response, we're all technologists these days, right? So thing, and he was, of course, running a big chunk of the strategy there. So it just shows how this has grown together, and that's exactly where we sit as well. We publish reports, but mostly we advise senior leaders in their decision-making process.
I love it. You guys bring fantastic research and just that like insightful perspective to all the problems and everything, which is amazing. So in 17 years when you've been at Aite and in Boston, a lot has changed in 17 years. You go back to those days of sort of SMA to UMA to direct indexing and the rise of digital, major market correction right in the middle of that, tons of mergers, private equities, like all these trends. You go back over that amount of time, it doesn't seem like that long, but oh my gosh, the world is so different now. For you personally, like what has been the most surprising, or some of the more surprising things that you've seen come out of innovation and come out of the wealth management industry that you've obviously had a ringside seat on? What are some of the ones that have most surprised you in terms of just how far they've gone or what's happened?
Yeah, no, I think how the speed of change has picked up in recent years, right? We've been, when you look at when 2008 the crisis hit, and it was somewhat, we talked about UMA, for example. If you take that example, beforehand, but then it somewhat stalled and nothing much happened. And then all of a sudden, strategies start shifting. And there's a couple of things like the zero commission trading, like fundamental economics that are changing, and technology, and the pandemic, and digitalization, and all of a sudden everything is changing. And so I feel like, while we have been talking about some trends in over the last 15 years, not much has changed, or things have been, lip service at best, and all of a sudden it accelerates. And right now we have one of those points where we said it casually in the past, that it will drive a wedge between the leaders and the laggards. And I think this time it's really on. The game is on for firms either to change or to be left behind. And it doesn't, like in 2001 or 2008, it's not just business as usual, right? When a Schwab buys DDA, Morgan Stanley buys E-Trade, fintech acquisitions happening left, right, and center. So you got a changing world around us that is just in no way similar to what it was before. And so I think that is really the exciting time. And I had the pleasure to interview for one of our events, Andy Sieg, the president of Merrill Lynch, as well as Sally Krawcheck, the founder of Alois. And when you hear those folks and how they tick and what they see going forward, I think that's one of the thrills in this role I'm in. You speak with folks that are really making decisions at the firms, and like Andy would say, well, all the old ways of looking at performance, KPIs, you can throw them out the window, because with the whole digitalization that's happened, we are in a complete different market. And firms like Merrill, and not wanting necessarily to single them out, I think there's a lineup of firms and many really sharp RAs that do fantastic work as well. There's a lot changing, and so I think this is where I think the change is real, the change is on, and I think the clients are moving on as well, and that is really where ultimately, when firms start losing assets, that's where it hurts, right? And that's I think that's happening.
I totally agree. The crack between the haves and the have-nots has gotten big enough that we're seeing sunlight. And I look at what Carson Group just got valued at, which you could make all kinds of arguments about that, but I personally would see that as they're getting a premium multiple because of their technology. And once that has happened, and once you start seeing firms that have invested, I would just say moderately. I don't think that they've like blown the doors off. That like they didn't build like an Aladdin product or something, but the fact that they focused on it and they were ahead, people are looking to say, yeah, let's go. We're gonna fund the firms that are ready for the future. And there is this like it's like California and the 49ers like just rush to technology that's going on right now. I've never seen anything like it.
I totally agree. And I think this is a cross section between RAs and banks, and RAs and brokerages, and so you have from your own background at First Republic Bank, right? The interest in RAs of that banks have, and also the valuations around RAs, and versus some not referring to First Republic, but some small bank trust firms are really interested in appearing much more like RAs these days because of the interest in the business model. And so I think there's of course there's complete different technology environment there. There's everything is completely run differently in the RA space, but you could see that fee only, client-centric proposition, less salesy, is really bringing home with firms and bringing home with valuations. And of course, I think when you pair technology with this business model, you get something great.
Yeah, I agree. And I think you look at the future, and you look at like how much that's going to progress, and much money is going into technology, innovation is going into technology. Like those that are getting it now, that are really understanding what this can do for their business, just start to take off. I love it. So
absolutely.
Yeah, let's pivot for a second. So like I've known you for a long time, but like you to a lot of people, and probably less like this to me, but even still less to me, like you're Alois, right? You're sort of you've got this knowledge and perspective on the world, but in our industry, like in your role right now, like what gets you going? Like when you wake up in the morning on a Monday morning, like you're ready to go. Like, what is it that really gets you moving? Like, what's your motivation for continuing to just do amazing work year after year?
Yeah, and thanks for the feedback. I appreciate it. The motivation is really curiosity, right? So I think an analyst or in an analyst role, you got to bring this natural curiosity to the table, to wanting to understand why certain things are happening in the industry and putting the data behind it, right? And that is really what. So there's a natural sense of curiosity in our role, and that's one thing. The second thing, I think, and this goes hand in hand with the first, is that wanting to help people with their problems or with their whatever the challenges are they have at hand, right? So it's not so much that when you remember back in the day when I was at UBS, right? I really had three roles. I was involved in 2 data warehouse builds, and I was doing the onshore private banking platform for UBS in Western Europe, right? And those projects take years to do, right? So things. So it really is you find you're watching paint dry, in many ways, and so this is you have thrill, of course. There's things that happen, but much is happening very slowly. Again, this has accelerated a little bit in the meantime. Things moving faster, but when you are working with so many clients and you see certain problems come up in tandem across the industry, and you really feel like, oh, this is something we need to sink our teeth into. It really is an interesting challenge, and it's not that we do the same thing over and again. We do different things every time. We have a toolbox, of course, but we're trying to solve different things. We're trying to solve, why is direct indexing right now talked about? What is it, right? Will it stand a chance going forward, or is it not, right? And that is, of course, a question that, say, 3 years ago, people weren't really asking. Now everybody's asking it, right? ESG, how to use ESG in a client engagement framework, right? And that those kind of things are, I think, that going with the times in terms of the topics, but also then trying to get to the bottom of the challenge. So, and with that, of course, helping our clients advance. And that I think that combination is really what the thrill is, right? That you can do something. Of course, the downside of it is, quite often you hand strategy over, or you hand advice over to somebody, and you don't know what's happening with it. So you're not really you're not in charge of the implementation anymore. And that is, of course, we feel like, kind of told you, don't buy that firm, like it is. And quite often it's like the rationale is just very different than ultimately is being put to work than what we give to our clients. So it's a little bit arm's length, but at the same time, there's a thrill of trying to really go to the bottom of those current trends that are unfolding in the industry.
Love it. Has that evolved over the last 17 years as you've been here? Has it changed for you, like as you've gotten older, or as the industry's moved forward, or your sort of role as sort of your company and your role has increased? Has that, like, motivation and things that sort of drive you, has that changed, or is that still sort of core to kind of who you are?
Yeah, I mean, the team has grown. I've worked with a lot of smart folks, right? So you stand on the shoulders of giants, right? So and I think our role is particularly not just our team, but the network we have in the market, right? So we stand on folks that are really doing it, that are being through it, and we have a network 17 years ago we didn't have, right? So and now all of a sudden you can call up a Doug Fritz or Riley Everidge, or and you say, hey, what do you think about this, right? And I think I see often our role not as the smartest people, but the folks that have access to a broad network and can aggregate. And that is actually the biggest skill in our business, is not so much saying like, so smart, right? But more, I can see the forest. I can see the full picture. I'm not just looking at single data items. I'm looking at what's going on here. And that is, I think, coming back to that computer science background. One thing, I've never been in coding in my entire career, right? But one thing I've learned is to analyze systems and to look at why does A happen if B happens, right? And what are the connections? And that is, I think, when you're an analyst, you need to be able to take the 30,000-foot view and see the pieces and how they play together. And that is really the value added we bring to the industry. It's not so much that we come up with stuff that hasn't been existing before, but we can condense it down and really put numbers and dynamics around it that then make sense. You need to go this way, and that I think is again has gotten over the 17 years so much better because of the historic information that you have accumulated, but also the network that you have grown, and the industry change that finally after that long, you can see certain things that were talked about back then all of a sudden either get traction or fail, and most of that is
or all the stuff we said was going to happen actually happened. You're like, wait, that was totally going to happen, and it's now happening. It's amazing. But I love that systematic mind that like you totally have that, where like correlations that no one else can see. Like on a Monday when A moves forward, Tuesday will move backwards. By Wednesday, that thing's like surprisingly large. Like that's, I think, why I like talking to you so much, is that you can see all those correlations and all the machinery coming together in the industry.
You see some underlying forces that are at play, and once you kind of have a grasp of what's happening here, for example, when Schwab put zero commission in place, right, in October 19, you could tell the clock is ticking for each rate to be sold. It was just an obvious one, right? This has to happen because, again, Schwab was skating into an area where they had the economics under control. They had a broad business model. Some firms missed that, right? And in the full service world, it's just a different economics and it's a different dynamic, but you have very similar things that digitalization will take certain firms out, right? And when you have to, I think one thing that you learn over time is patience. Right, the thing when you're young, everything needs to happen now, and you want to see impact. And when you take the long view, you really start to, sort of almost like Asian folks have, right? They have an amazing patience, right? When we go, our second biggest market is actually Japan at Aite Group, and so when we look at how they are just always looking at his history. They're looking at how things have evolved, and it's a great amount of patience. Sometimes it drives you nuts, right? Because it feel like, let's take a decision, right? And it's just a very systematic way and a patient way of looking about it. And that I think is something as you get older, you acquire much more, but also you enjoy then when things are actually going in that direction that you thought it would go, right? Because it's again, and I think that wheel has started to turn faster, no doubt. So that effect, like from the time when Schwab made that decision to the time the M&A happened, it was a matter of, I thought like it would be a matter of a few months. It was a matter of a few weeks that everybody caught up with the pricing, and the M&A happened. Right.
It's amazing. It's just the whole world shifted overnight,
Absolutely.
I love that. So, digging then forward, right? So thinking the next 17 years of where things are headed. So I love asking you this question, because I think you have a very awesome answer to this one. But like, where does the industry go? I mean, there's things moving faster and changes happen, and these tectonic shifts that just overnight change things. In your systematic mind, and I love the idea of like big cycles, little cycles, and you're right, there are certain cultures that can see the big 30-year cycle, and they can like, I'm okay because in 30 years this is going to be fine. We're all like looking at the second hand in the watch. But for you, and maybe for Aite, like where do you personally see the future of wealth management headed? Let's say over the next, I gotta give you a time frame, because otherwise you're gonna be like, Martian equities are gonna be really hot in like 50 years, right? But over the next 5 years, what happens in our industry? Maybe that no one else is necessarily predicting, or what do you think is going to be like the big trend?
I mean, I think it's the obvious stuff, but it's something that has been said in the past, and it's but it becomes true now, is that client centricity is everything, right? The thing is that we are still living in a product world. We still when you look at the firms, the KPIs are defined around product sales. We live in silos. That's all of that is needs to be rectified in order to really become product centric or client centric, and move away from the product centricity. And that's a really tough shift, right? Because of many bonuses and careers are on the line if you change that, right? So it really is I think, but without that shift, you will not get anywhere. And that's what the startups have done so well, right? When you look at the Money Lion, or you look at folks that have been just building a model entirely around the client, right? Of course, they're very small, right? They can't scale that model. But then you look at personal capital, and all of a sudden you see the price tag around personal capital and say, whoa, that's awesome, right? And so I think there is there's a reward for client centricity, and there's a massive hurdle that firms have to overcome legacy to move to that area. Now, digitization is exposing it mercilessly, right? You cannot, as someone president of an insurance BD told me about a couple of years ago, well, we can't shoot 7 client portals to our clients anymore, right? It's just like, it doesn't work, and that's what they have done for years, and they got away with it because chances are the cross-sell or the scope of engagement with the client was just so narrow, right? And that is just not enough anymore, because you are exposed to the product dynamics if you're product centric, and those are where we know where to go. So the value add is on the client centricity, and that is requiring content, that's requiring engagement, that's requiring things that are value delivering to the client. And that is, I think, what is true value for the client. It's not that they have all of a sudden a product. It's not that they got a certain price point, right? It's all, economics that are fluff around it. ESG is another topic that it really exposes that equation of what is value to the client, right? And if you can't get that right, if you can't cater to the client will move on. And so or you will just be sort of that gap filler, one, playing the seventh dwarf, right? So thing, and saying like, oh, I'm also here. Now I'm putting a product into this equation, but in essence, you have no strategic position at the client's financial life. And so I think that is really coming, I think, with all the dynamics on technology, with dynamics on the product side. I think this is something that will determine who's winning going forward. And the whole thing about I think the second thing, which is also critical, is in that overall equation, what is your value prop, right? What do you really need to own? Because what you don't need to own, hire to stand on their shoulders. It is not that, the times of where you say like, oh, I just got everything here and the control, forget about it, right? We can plug platforms together. We can, there's certain things where you have an advantage and have an edge and have an economic equation that works for you and is really worth exploring. And there's some that we feel like this is, like for example, do you need banking? Do you need to create banking, or can you just stand on the Galileo? Can you stand on folks that are doing it really well? And chances are you're not going to make any money out of it anyway. So, but
I was telling someone the other day, like, there's always someone that's going to be more mediocre than you. So stop trying to be mediocre to everybody. There's someone that's always going to be better at being mediocre.
That's brilliant. Yes, indeed.
You got to find out what you're going to be really. And I had a quote on Twitter, LinkedIn the other day, like Steve Auction said it best, like, find out what you're going to be bad at. He said it straight, said it straight up, like, pick something you're just going to suck at so that you can actually be good at something else. People hate that. They hate that idea that they have to actually be good at one thing at the exclusion of many others.
Totally. And I think that is the clients are seeing that now, because the transparency in the offering is much greater than it ever has been. Right? I think we're not talking about the best price on the product or whatever. It really is much more the feeling that I get when I work with a firm. Right? Are they actually listening to me? Are they sending me, it doesn't even need to be a phone call, but are they sending me information that is relevant, timely, adds value to my life? Or is it just fluff? Is it just sales pitch, right? And I think we still live in a world of too much sales pitch and not enough client centricity. And that, I think, is, again, it's of course something that we've been talking about for years. I think with digitalization and in some of the other themes, I think we're seeing it happening now. And that is, again, where you have firms like an InvestCloud, or have firms that are fundamentally data-driven, right? And I think that is where the buck stops. It really is, the data to understand the client situation and where they are and what interest they have and where they might go next. That is at the core, right? And if you And when you look at the data architecture, and again, coming back to my background of having built the data warehouses and knowing how fragmented we are at UBS, at the time, we could not reconcile marketing product definition with accounting product definition. So we had no idea how much profitability we had on the product, right? Which is, I mean, I mean, this is a massive firm, right? A global wealth player. I mean, I hope it has improved. I don't want to make any assumptions, but I mean, you try to put all the things together in one data structure, and you see it doesn't work, it doesn't gel, right? So you mercilessly see nobody sees the real profitability on what we do here, right? Nobody sees that because you can't reconcile the data, right?
You can't measure it. Good luck trying to change it, right?
You can measure, so you're basically flying in the dark, right? So thing, and that's and so it really is. I think the data is where, again, I think of course big debate around AI and big debate about next best action and all of that stuff, but I think and I had the chance to moderate a C-suite panel of executives, you know, where we talked about AI, and but it very quickly goes to data, and we stayed almost the whole 90 minutes on the data topic, right? Because you got to sort that first. There's no way around. There's no faking data, right?
Yeah, and it's so hard. It's so not sexy to focus.
Oh, totally.
But all the great firms that are really crushing it, you mentioned Merrill before, Alois, like the majority of the great firms have all figured out that the future's kind of paved on data. And so if you want to have a bumpy ride, cool. But if you want to have a smooth ride where you can drive really fast, you need to get the data laid down the right way.
The digitalization is, of course, introducing a real-time engagement with the client. And then when you have real-time engagement, and the intermediary of an advisor is not going in between and moderating and aggregating and getting the story right, in prep, hour-long prep work, right? And but the client pings your website straight and wants to have a good story and the right story and the correct data and the relevant information content. And you know, most firms are you know, totally out of their league in that scenario.
I'm gonna pin you down. This is I pin Alois down on video moment. Haha. Is who's doing it well? So name. You mentioned Merrill and Alois. I actually put them already on my list of folks that are doing it very, very well. But either those two or others, who's doing well, and then why? Like, why are they doing it so well?
I think there's when I talk. So on one of the last events we had Jeff McMillan, who's the Chief Data and Analytics Officer at Morgan Stanley, be part of the panel, and you know, I remember years ago, and I've known him for a long time as well. And he said, look, you know, I cannot outsource the data problem, right? I mean, I can get people to help me build the data architecture, but the data is my problem, right? So I need to sort the data, and this takes years, right? It's not something you say, oh, sort, you know, it started last year and done this year. No, it is a discipline. It is a lot of thinking around why is you know, why are things not happening? What do we need to change? What we need in terms of make insightful decisions for the client, right? And that again, Morgan Stanley built it, Carson built it. You mentioned Carson built a data warehouse, of course. I had the pleasure of having Neil McLagey from the president of Ameriprise on that executive discussion on AI the other day, and again, they've been for years building a data lake and whatever you want to call it, right? So it doesn't even need to be a sexy term like data lake, whatever. But it is about starting to organize data, and sometimes you do not quite see that ROI initially, right? You know, you're lousy at that the data stewardship, and you just need to take matters in your own hands and start getting better. And it's hitting. To use a baseball analogy, which I have no idea about, hitting singles, right? It really is that one, you know, strike at a time, and it's not about So in any case, I think that's really, I think where firms have that, you know, again, Morgan Stanley, Merrill, Carson, again, Ameriprise, you know, big firms have the pleasure of course, having deep pockets to put it in. But I think the interesting thing with the latest developments is that there's so many cloud-based solutions, again, like an Invest Cloud, like a Salesforce, like again, Orion, that are all of their merits. They all slightly different position, but I think they all have in common that they're typically not an accounting system. They're typically not Salesforce of course is a CRM, but they're not sort of. I'm really thinking more the financial services cloud that is a data platform more than it is a CRM. A CRM is sort of using it, but it's really a data architecture that you can do anything with. And so those systems, I think typically when you think back to the old RAA days, right, everything was hinged on Advent Access or Advent APX, right, and everything was going around it. But it's an accounting system. All it knows is portfolios, holdings, so it's good for investments, but it's investments is only a fraction of what the client is all about. And that I think is, so we need to push it higher. We need to have a data layer that is independent of a product stack. And so you need to reach into, and of course now we have digital sending signals our way, that unless we understand the digital signals, we're still nowhere, right? And so again, there has to be something that's in between. Now you can build it yourself if you Merrill, you do that, or again, and that's the fascinating time right now, we do have platforms that are hosted that are available to use. But I think what I think the problem is in the industry is nobody goes out and shops for a data layer. Right? Nobody says, "Oh, I need a data layer," and everybody shops for functionality and for something that does something where they have just right now an urgent need, right? And that thinking, it does take some Kabir Sethi or Neil McCleggy that have the budgets. They say like, we're gonna, or Ron Carson, right? And say like, we're gonna do that. And that is, I think, where almost coming back to the Riley Etheridge comment, right? The old technologies these days, right? It is not enough anymore to run a business and be really good at that. You really need to have that eye on where's technology going, how's the data managed. So actually, it is really, I think, without that, you can be a best business person, you still will be mediocre at growing your firm.
I love it. I think I'm gonna use so much of this conversation in future client conversations, because it's like that it's unsexy to talk about your data and sort of to plan ahead. But those that have seen the next 10 years can visualize their firms in the next 10 years or so, like get that road's gonna be bumpy unless you pave it with something. So there could be two cars that come out of the factory exact same. One car can go 120 miles an hour, one car can go 15. It isn't because the car, it's the fact that the 15s run on a like backcountry, unpaved, pothole filled road of data. Totally. Other one's on good data. So like that company can run 120,000 miles at 100 miles an hour or something, because it's running on good data. We have to find a way as an industry to express the value of getting your data under control. I think I struggle to articulate it, other than point to firms that are doing it well and say the reason why is that they've got their data under control, and so they can build on it versus not. But to
use your analogy, sorry to interrupt, but to use your analogy further, the car analogy, right, or the van analogy, I think firms have used data as the exhaust. So it just came out of, the car was running and it just came out the back and evaporated, right? And it was sort of a byproduct of what is happening. And I think back in the day, and again, taking the long view here and having been in this business for a long time, but if you remember North Star, San Francisco-based firm, right?
I know North Star. I knew North Star very well, as you know.
Absolutely, and so that's, that data-centric wealth management architecture was really like, I think it was the first time I really hit that was on some of those, slide decks that they had, and it was like, oh, this is interesting, right? And coming from a data background, I think you totally get it. That this is exactly what we need to do. Of course, they were way too early, and maybe the industry wasn't ready. Maybe the product wasn't ready. I don't know, but I think you could dig out those exact same slides and say like, yes, here we are. It's like, and we're still talking about it 17 years on.
Yeah. That's amazing. I blast in the past with North Star. So, all right. So closing question for you, Alois. So the next 2 years or so, sort of like, what excites you the most? What are you looking forward to the most? What is it that, you and I are going to have another conversation a year from now, or hopefully sooner if we get together in conferences. But what is the thing you're looking forward to most, personal and professional, just like in general, like what is ahead for you?
Yeah, I think when you look forward, 2 years is a short time frame, but as we said, the change is happening so much more rapid than it used to be. Of course, I think everybody looks forward to getting finally out of the pandemic, right? So things so that being able to get back into to traveling and meeting people in person, right? And that not a Zoom is not a great way of meeting people that you never see, like a client in Norway, or so it really is I think from an ecological perspective a great way of connecting, but of course having a beer with somebody is something entirely different, right? And so I think that is something that hopefully again we thought we all would be out of the woods already. So 2 years might be a window that we still might be struggling in some ways with the same old story, right? But finally it seems to be this light at the end of the tunnel. So that's one thing. Second thing is, I think as somebody said, like, when you try to install and to adopt a habit, it does take more than just a few weeks of doing things. It takes a few months of doing things, right? So when we think about pandemic world forward, I think we're already in year 2 of this this ordeal, and so certain behavior is going to stick. And so when we look at forward now, when we think about our business models, our behavior, ourselves in our personal life, everything, right? We have changed wholesale how we act and how we do things and how businesses are being run, and so I think that's the exciting thing. I think for me most is to see, again, it's a hopefully once in a lifetime crisis, but it is one where we see the impact quite quickly unfolding, and so I think that is really fascinating time. What will be that post-pandemic world? How will we fly less? Will we do business in a complete different way with our clients? How do our clients look like when they come out of the other side, right? Something, and this, and I feel like we have a sense for, it's going to be snapping back to normal. I don't think it will be. So that's, I mean, I'm not sure that excites me. Well, it does excite me in a sense to figure out what will it be, right? And I'm sure there will be TV shows and whatever being made on that very topic once the dust settles. But that's interesting. I do think the whole direction on financial wellness and breaking down planning into a scalable discipline being offered to low end, mass affluent, mass retail, where the help is most needed, right, in our industry. And that's across the board. That bifurcation in business we talked about is unfortunately happening in the consumer, amongst consumers as well. So I think we are really on the hook as technologists, as both management firms, to provide scalable advice and guidance to people that have no access to it. And I think that is something we put a lot of energy at Aite Group and research into it, because it is so necessary. And if we want to avoid disgruntled mob doing stuff we do not want to have happen, right? We need to make sure there's a broad-based opportunity to build wealth and an opportunity to get ahead. And sometimes I feel like this has been lost. And of course, being from Europe, social networks look quite different over there, and we can discuss that in a complete different session. But there is I think the particularly wealth management, banking, and so on are on the hook to get better there. And I think that's if we can contribute a little bit to that, to show these are good ways of doing it, I think I would be very thrilled to add my 5 cents worth into that equation and then that dynamic.
That was awesome. Great answer on that one. I think and you're super valuable, and you're 17 years and the next 17 years just adding value to helping them move forward. So thank you so much for participating in this. It's you've been a very good friend for a long time, and I love spending time with you anyway. So any opportunity I have, I'll take it.
Same here. I'm thrilled to be. Yeah.
No, the first 2 answers you gave of what you're excited about, one was going back to conferences, which I think just means spending time with me. So I'm going to take that.
Indeed. I would love to get.
You didn't say it that way.
I would love to take a ride in your van. It's like you promised me the keys.
Totally. Come on out.
Take you up on that. I will take you up on that. Go down the California highway.
That's great. But thank you so much. Thank you for your friendship. Thank you for your leadership in the industry. For folks that are watching or listening, you have to follow just Aite and follow Alois. He's fantastic. Just such a resource to the industry. Thank you so much for the work you do. And
thanks, Doug.
Thank you
I love what you do. I love what you do with F2 Strategies as well. I have to say, great firm. You've been building an amazing franchise there. So
appreciate
looking
that
forward to seeing how that evolves as well. So thanks so much for having me, and I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks, Alois.
Thank you. Cheers, man. Bye-bye.